Well, we're going to get started today. We're looking at Moses' faith, and I just want to start with a little bit of a video to kind of set the stage. Many of you have seen this before or heard about this before. This is the marshmallow test, where kids are offered one marshmallow. They could eat it right away, but if they wait and don't eat their marshmallow, then they'll get two.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you I'd give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
So a cute video that illustrates something that all of us are faced with all of the time. Instant gratification versus delayed gratification. What is it that would give us the ability to say no to something I want now? And the answer for many of us is nothing, right? Nothing is going to make me say no to what I want now because we live in an instant gratification kind of culture. We want what we want it now. But sometimes in life, we have to be willing to say no to something that we want now so that we could say yes to that tomorrow. And how do we do that? And in reality, there's really only one way that we can give up something that we want now, have the power to say no to something we want now, and that is the hope of something better that's coming later. And so we've been in this series on faith, and if we could bring the next slide up, the series on faith, and we've been seeing that God values faith more than anything. And a relationship with Jesus is all about faith. And faith, by definition, if you really think about it, faith by definition is all about delayed gratification. I mean, faith by definition means that I am trusting in something that I don't now have. something that I don't now possess, something I can't yet see. And that can often be a hard time for us as people. In reality, it means that at times I will have to deny myself something I want now if I'm going to be a person of faith. And if you've been walking with Jesus for any time, you've probably figured this out. You know, a lot of times when we come to faith and we become Christians and we place our faith in Christ, we'll do it because Jesus is meeting a need in the moment, in my life right now, today. You know, I'm racked with guilt over something that I've done, and Jesus gives me freedom from shame, from the things I've done in the past. Or I need him to answer a prayer, and so I go to him in a moment of desperation, and I pray, and he meets the prayer. He meets my need in that moment. Or you know, there's so many things that he can do for us in the day. You know, maybe he brings healing to our bodies, or he brings peace in the midst of despair. But we come to him because he meets our need in the moment. But as we continue to journey with him, all of us will get to these crossroads, these crises of faith, where we realize that if I'm going to continue to follow Jesus, it's going to cost me something right now. And what is it that makes us willing to do that, to give that up, to say no to that? Well, for many of us, we would say it's my love for Christ. You know, he gave up so much for me. He did so much for me. He loves me so much that I could do this for him or not do this for him or give that up or whatever it is he's asking me to do. I'm willing to do it because he went to the cross. He denied himself for my sake. He gave up everything for me. And so I'm willing to give up everything for him, regardless of what that is. And so for many of us, that is the chief motivation of what would drive us to delayed gratification, to deny myself in the moment for the sake of following Christ. Some of us, it's just, we've discerned that it's just the wise thing to do. To do what Jesus asked us to do, to obey him, because we've seen that there's wisdom in that. And that when we obey the teachings of Christ, that it often leads to a more vibrant, more fulfilling life. But there's yet another motivation that has compelled Christians for 2,000 years to say no and to stand firm and even give up their lives for the sake of Christ. And we find what that thing is as we look today to Moses' faith. And if you have a Bible or a device with a Bible on it, I would invite you to find the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 11. No series on faith would be complete without going to Hebrews chapter 11. It's known as the chapter of faith, or the faith chapter. Will be there today. And kids, our word of the day today is, and I need some help, Jason. It is Moses. I just have an apology to make. I forgot to give you a kid's word last week, and many of you pointed that out to me. I am so sorry. So I put it in the slides this week so I wouldn't forget. So you count how many times you hear me say the name Moses, write it on a piece of paper, take it to the foyer afterwards, and we'll have something for you. So we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 11, and if you have found that, we're going to be going to verse 24. This is such a powerful passage. I don't want you to miss any of it, so we're going to be putting it up on the screen today. This is what the writer of Hebrews says. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as a son of Pharaoh's daughter. And next slide. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. All right. This is a powerful passage. We want to unpack it, but first let's just do a little bit of historical background. When Moses entered the world, probably about 3,500 years ago, his people, the Israelites, were slaves in Egypt. They're working under these oppressive taskmasters, and they're building these huge buildings and these cities for the Egyptians, and their lives aren't their own. They are the property of the Egyptians, and they're treated as property. But God had promised that there would be a deliverer, that he would send someone to set the people free from Egyptian bondage, and that promise was fulfilled when Moses was born. Moses was born to two Hebrew slaves, Amram and Jochebed. And at the time that Moses is born, there is a death decree in Egypt that all Hebrew boys that are born are to be instantly drowned. They're to be thrown into the Nile and drowned. Well, Jochebed sees something in her son, or maybe it's just the pull of a mother's love, but she hides her son for several months. And when it becomes apparent that she can't hide him forever, she devises this very crafty plan. And she makes a bassinet out of reeds and pitch, something that will float. And she studies, I believe, Pharaoh's daughter. And she sees that Pharaoh's daughter has a heart of compassion. And she sees that she doesn't have a son, but desperately wants one. And so she brings in her daughter Miriam, and she educates her on this plan. She puts Moses into this basket, and she places it in the reeds along the Nile River, right where she knew that Pharaoh's daughter would come and bathe. And Pharaoh's daughter takes the bait. She hears this baby crying, and she sends a servant to go, and the boy is found. And Pharaoh's daughter claims this child as her own. Well, the next stage in the plan is now to bring Jochebed on the scene. Miriam runs up and says, "Is there any way I can help you? Maybe you need someone to help take care of this baby?" "Yes, find a nursemaid, someone from the Hebrews. Bring her." And Jochebed is brought onto the scene, and her plan works like a charm. Not only does her son get to live, but she gets to take care of him and gets paid to do so, and he would be protected. And I just imagine what those years would be like between Jochebed and Moses. This mother knowing she has but a short time with her son. And she uses every moment, every opportunity to kind of pour into him his heritage and the promises of God and how he is a part of this plan and that he would be this deliverer that would grow up and save his people. I often wonder how we parents would parent differently if we really knew how short our time was with our kids. If you're thinking 18 or 20 years, I got plenty of time. I can get to that discipleship stuff. Well, as a father of a 19-year-old, I'll tell you, it goes so quick. Jochebed had the advantage of knowing she had the specific amount of time, and she was so intentional. And I think if we parent like Jochebed, it'll do us well. To know how short your time is with your child and pour into them. Well, the time came for Moses to leave his family's home and to move in with his new mom, Pharaoh's daughter. We don't know how old he was, probably very young, but what culture shock this boy would have gone through. Like moving from a dirt-floored African hut into the White House in one day. He's going from abject poverty, living with slaves, to the palace of the most powerful man in the world at the time. I mean, he is in a place now where he would be educated by all the best teachers. He would enjoy all of this great celebrity in Egypt, as well as every luxury that great nation could offer. One day he would ascend the throne, and he would become Pharaoh, where he would become the chief god amongst the Egyptians, and he would receive the worship of the nation. I mean, Moses had it all. I mean, he had nothing but upside in his future. But something happened along the way in Moses' heart. He came to one of those crossroads where he realized that he needed to make a very hard decision. And when he was younger, maybe he thought he could live in both worlds, that he could be Hebrew and Egyptian. Maybe he thought he could enjoy both lives. He could still go and visit Jochebed and Amram and his brothers and sisters and cousins and get some good Hebrew home cooking whenever he wanted. But then he can go back to the palace and enjoy the safety and the luxury of the palace. Maybe he thought while he was a child that he would be able to enjoy both worlds. But the Bible says when he had grown up, he realized he couldn't have both. When he had grown up, he realized he had to make a choice. When he had grown up, he realized that being Hebrew would cost him something. And it would cost him big. Verse 24 simply says it like this, that he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Just a few words said so simply to describe a decision that must have been gut-wrenching, that must have kept him awake for countless nights. What must that have been like to be Moses making this decision, to refuse to be known as Pharaoh's daughter? He saw the abuse the people suffered at the hands of their taskmasters. They would work 7 days a week, sun up to sundown. They were abused, they were whipped. Oftentimes they lost their lives at the hand of their taskmasters. They're treated like animals, and these were his people. This was his family, his cousins, his brothers, his sisters, his mother, his father. same time, his family's being abused. He's living in comfort and ease and safety and enjoying the best that the world has to offer. People are looking up to him. He could easily have just kept quiet, stayed in the palace, waited out his time. He could have justified himself that he could do more good for his people as Pharaoh, that he could wait to become Pharaoh, then he could set his people free. He could do something really good for them. But verse 25 says, he chose. He came to the point and he made a decision. And he chose. He couldn't stay in both worlds. He had to choose. It's a lot like we're often forced to make choices and make the same kind of decisions when we know we can't continue to do what we're doing or live the way we're living or treating people the way we're treating them and continue to follow Jesus. At times in our faith journey, we too are forced to make some hard decisions. We come to these crossroads, these forks in the road where we realize that if I'm going to continue to go this direction, then it's going to lead me away from Christ. But if I want to continue to follow Jesus, then I need to make a turn. And maybe it's the abuse of a substance or alcohol, or maybe it's the use of pornography. Maybe it's the way I treat my spouse or my kids or the way I'm running my business. Maybe it's the way I handle money, the way I talk, the language that I use, the way I interact with the opposite sex. We come to these forks in the road where we realize I can't follow Jesus and keep going the direction I'm going, keep doing the things that I'm doing. I need to turn away. I need to turn to Jesus. And for Moses, one road was continue to enjoy the comfort and the influence and the pleasure of the palace. That was the road of Egypt. And the other road was the road of identifying with his people and kind of signing up for a life of suffering, disgrace, being mistreated. Now, most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we really wonder what decision would we make in Moses' shoes. And most of us probably know what decision we would make, right? But Moses comes to this very difficult decision, and he makes a hard decision to align himself with God's people, and as a result, he gives up everything that Egypt has to offer. I mean, think how hard that decision would be to make. How easy it is to justify our decisions to maintain power, to maintain wealth, to continue to do what we're doing. How easy it is to self-protect. It is the greatest motivator in our lives. We could justify doing anything if we just protect ourselves. Yet he chose to give up the throne of the world's greatest empire and associate himself with a nation of slaves. How could he do that? How can he make that hard decision? And the answer is just one word. Faith. Faith. He was able to see something that other people couldn't see. Faith gave him the ability to delay gratification for something that had greater value than all of the treasures of Egypt. I mean, faith gives us that ability too. Faith gives us the ability to see things that the human eye can't see. Faith gives us the ability to choose that which is better, that which lasts longer, that which is more enduring. Faith gives us the ability to see what is really, in the long run, in our best interest, so I could say no to this today, so I could say yes to that tomorrow. And in Moses' experience, there are two key words in this passage I think are so vital to us in kind of living out this kind of Moses-like faith. And the first word is found here, short time. Rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. I love that. Faith gave Moses the ability to see the incredible brevity of life. Life is short. He understands that his suffering with the people of God would be but a short time. And more than that, he understood that the pleasures of sin that he would enjoy should he stay in Egypt would be but a short time. Moses understood the brevity of life, how short it is, how quickly it passes, and the pleasures that were enticing him, the temptations that were kind of wooing him to stay in power and to preserve himself and to maintain the throne. He knew they wouldn't last long. They would be but for a short time. And by faith, he was looking at longer-term payoffs. He chose that which was better because he was going for a better deal, something that would last longer. And that leads us to the second phrase I think is so important. It's found in verse 26. It says that he was looking ahead. Moses wasn't living in the moment. He wasn't living for the moment. He wasn't living for instant gratification. He was looking ahead. That's the delayed gratification. How could he make such a decision? How could he say no to the riches and the pleasures of Egypt and say yes to shame and suffering? He wasn't living in the moment. He was looking ahead. What was he looking ahead to? He was looking ahead to his reward. Well, all right, what was Moses' reward? Being with the people of God in the desert, having them whine and complain for 40 years? No, I don't think that was his reward. I hope that wasn't his reward. I think the Bible says something different. Moses' reward was going to come from God. It was going to come after this life. And it was going to come in heaven. Moses was able to delay his gratification. He was able to say no to pleasure now. He was able to say no to the marshmallow because he understood that the marshmallow wouldn't last long. And that what was coming after would be so much better and would never fade away. I think Moses' lesson, the lesson of Moses' faith could be summarized like this, and I'm hoping Kirk will put this on a t-shirt. I think I want to make this my life motto. Life is short, heaven is real. That's Moses' faith. Life is short, heaven is real. And from our perspective, Moses made the right choice, didn't he? I mean, the guy lived 3,500 years ago. He made the right choice. I mean, would any of us want to talk him out of that decision? Would anyone us want to say, Moses, you're crazy. Don't do it. Be Pharaoh. We would have forgotten who he is, for sure. We wouldn't be talking about him today. But because his life is over, we would say, good choice. Because his suffering with the people of God is over, we would say, well done. Because the pleasures and the power of Egypt that he would have enjoyed for such a short time are 3,500 years ago. We would say, in hindsight, Moses made the right choice because the stuff he would have enjoyed is over and he is now enjoying. He's 3,500 years into enjoying his reward, and he has all of eternity to look forward to. Life is short. Heaven is real. Now, let me just kind of speak something I believe many of you are probably feeling or thinking right now because of the culture we live in, and I can resonate with this, that when we start talking about a reward, we get a bit uneasy. Or when we start talking about heaven as a motivator for the way I live today, it causes a bit of tension. And I think there's several reasons for that. I'd like to unpack them so we can kind of deal with this. But we don't like the idea of a reward, first of all, because the idea of a reward seems to contradict the concept of grace. Right? How can there be grace and reward? But a lot of times we have such a narrow view of what grace is. We think grace is just heaven, that grace is just forgiveness. But grace, according to the New Testament, is the power of God in me to transform my desires, to give me power to live for God. That's grace. Grace is the power of God in me to give me the ability to do stuff I could never do. And so when I do anything good, it's not by Dave's power. Any good I do is by grace. It is the power of God in me doing that good thing. And so what God says is, you will be rewarded for good things, the way you live your life. But guess who's doing that in you? It's me. It's grace. So basically, God says, live a holy life. I'll give you the ability to do it. It's my power in you, but then I'll give you the reward for it. That seems like grace to me, rewarding me for something he does in me. And so that's still grace. Or another reason we feel uneasy is we think back to the Dark Ages and how the church kind of held heaven out as a carrot to manipulate people or to get people to fall in line or do whatever it is the church wanted them to do. And that was an ugly period of church history. But that doesn't mean that heaven's not real. And it doesn't mean it shouldn't be a central part of our faith and our hope, because Jesus talked an awful lot about it. So, for the past 2,000 years, heaven has been a major motivator and source of hope for people all over the world. You know, today, I think I've seen a study, 97% of Americans believe in some kind of an afterlife. But very few would say that heaven would serve as a motivator to the way I live today. And I think there's some reasons for that, and I'd like to just kind of unpack these as well. In the last generation, some things have happened that have kind of undermined the motivating influence of heaven. And the first is this, the American dream. You know, we live in a country where we're like, could heaven be better than this? I mean, I have everything I need right now. I have so much to divert me, so much to entertain me, so much fun that I can do. I mean, could heaven really be better than this? Why would I want heaven when I'm living in Douglas County? You know, why? Really? Do I need to yearn for more than what I have here? It's the American dream. Until, of course, intense difficulties come into our lives. Or we lose a loved one. Or we're faced with our own mortality, which we all will be. And then all of a sudden, the American dream doesn't cut it anymore. And I want to hear about heaven. You know, I have sat by the bedside of many people who knew they were living their last days, and they don't want to hear about the American dream. They want me to go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and read about the second coming of Christ and the assurance that we have that he's coming to get us, and he's preparing a place for us. Another reason I think heaven has been undermined is that we have a lot of wrong ideas about what heaven will be like. You know, a lot of times we think about heaven, and we're like, oh, man, it's just going to be like a long, boring church service, right? I mean, it's like, wow, man, I better get all my fun out of the way in this short life, because when I get to heaven, it's going to be an eternity of napping and of, you know, listening to sermons and singing songs, and it's going to be playing harps, and it's going to be talking theology, and these are things that don't really seem exciting to me. I remember reading the Chronicle of Narnia series with my boys when they were younger, 7 series of books by C.S. Lewis, and you get to that last book and the last kind of chapters as they're entering into heaven, and C.S. Lewis says that heaven is kind of like an onion, and that with the farther in you go for all eternity, the more beautiful it gets, and the more we learn, and the more we know, and the more we love, and the more we experience for all eternity. We go inward, 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 inward. I was like, wow. I'm hungry for that. One final thing. As Americans, we are very much both and kind of people. We've already discussed this a little bit. But we don't like choosing between two good options, right? We want both, right? I'm a both and kind of guy. I'll take vanilla and chocolate. Thank you very much. We'll call it a swirl, and we'll take both. We don't want to choose between two good things. And so, as Americans, we have created a Christianity that fits our American dream, culture, and mentality. You can have both. You can have all the pleasures of the world, and you could still have Christ and heaven. It's both and. You could have your marshmallow now, and you could have 2 more later. It's both and. There is no cost to following Jesus. You don't have to choose. Jesus wants you to be happy, and so he wants you to say yes to everything. Now, I don't believe that's true. Because I believe what Jesus said is this. He said, if anyone would come after me, if anyone would walk in my footsteps, he must deny himself. That means sometimes I say no to me. Sometimes there will be things I need to say no to in the moment. He will deny himself and take up his cross. And 2,000 years later, we think, oh, he's speaking metaphorically. Yeah, take up our cross. You know, what does that mean? No, he was talking to people who would literally take up crosses and be executed for him. And 2,000 years later, we're like, what? Is that what that really means? He'll take up his cross and follow me. There will be times when to follow Christ means to deny myself. There will be even times when to follow Christ means to give up my life, as over 250,000 Christians do every year around this world, die for their faith. But according to Moses' faith, that's okay. Because the truth is this life is incredibly brief, and that we have a reward that is waiting for us that will never end. Life is short. Heaven is real. Listen, don't misunderstand me. Salvation is free. Right? We are saved by grace through faith. Nothing we do to be saved. But faith True faith will lead us to living our lives in a way that pleases Christ, that is empowered by Christ. And being empowered by Christ will eventually lead me to tension with the world I live in. He was very clear on this. You know, the world and I, we hate each other. He's talking about all this tension. The world doesn't know you. The world hates me. The world will hate you. I mean, there will be tension. And if there's not tension, there's a problem. It's going to cost me something. And in a both-and kind of culture that says I could have the world and have Jesus, let me just say, I am glad to be a part of a church where to follow Christ still costs something. No one's crucifying me. I'm not even being ostracized, but it costs something to be a part of Newday Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm glad to be a part of a church that still honors the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, that says, you know what, we're going to set aside a day. And we're going to come together and we're going to worship. And it may cost me work opportunities. It may cost me play opportunities. It may cost me recreational opportunities. But we're going to come together and we're going to prioritize worship together. Not because this is the time and the plan that we have come up with, but because it's the time and the plan that He came up with. I'm glad to be a part of a church that still upholds this value of abstinence from alcohol in a culture that says, you know what, pleasure is the most overriding value of all. And if it feels good, do it, even to the point of intoxication. Now, we would be a church that continues to uphold the biblical standard of giving 10% of what I earn to God. And to say, you know what, a tithe, that's not even the ceiling of generosity. That's just the floor. That's where it starts. And that God would want to take more and more of my heart as I learn to be more and more generous. I love that following Jesus can actually cost me something, even though it's not much. That it could cost me something. Not just because it cost Moses something, but because it cost Jesus something. I mean, Jesus was willing to count the cost. I love that Jesus was willing to delay gratification because it all hangs on His willingness to delay gratification. He was willing to take the hard road out of heaven and wrap Himself in humanity to become a servant. He was willing to live a very difficult life of poverty. He was willing to surround Himself with, at times, boneheads and walk with them and do life with them and be patient with them. He was ultimately willing to go through a mock trial and for the very people He was dying for be beaten, be whipped, be spit on, and ultimately be crucified. And how could He do that when He could have spoken a word and gone back to heaven? Why would He do that? Because He knew something better was coming. And the thing with Jesus is, the better thing He knew was coming wasn't for Him. That Jesus was willing to give up heaven and delay gratification, not for Himself, but because something better was coming for us. He died knowing that heaven was waiting for me. And knowing all this was about to happen, Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, back one please, if anyone would come after me, he will give up, he will deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And then he goes on to ask this question. He says, what good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Jesus here is talking about instant gratification versus delayed gratification. What good is it to gain everything this world has to offer in this life, in this moment, and lose eternity? What good is it? I mean, we're not talking about one marshmallow here versus two marshmallows. No. We're talking about one marshmallow versus an infinite amount of goodness and joy and love and new experiences without fear, without sickness, without pain, without injustice, without war, without cancer, without death, for eternity. And so Jesus says, what good would it be? What price would you be willing to pay? What price would be too high to follow Christ? What good is it? Jesus asks. What would you give? And He knew that nothing on this planet could possibly compare with what He has in store for us. What good is it to experience all this world has to offer and lose your eternity? What good is it to provide every opportunity for your child and have your child look you in the eye and say, Mom, Dad, you are the very best, to make the very best of all family memories, but then in the end, have your children wander away from Christ because you forgot to tell them how all supreme Christ is in our lives and how that comes first. He comes first above everything else. What good would it be? What good would it be to work your tail off and amass all of the toys and all of the technology and travel to all the most amazing places and have all the greatest experience our culture can give? What good is it if we experience all the culture has to give us but lose our soul? Jesus then turns the question around a bit and he says it like this. He says, what would you give in exchange for your soul? And I just imagine this is the angle he's coming at. He's kind of saying, picture this. You're at the end of your life. And you've had everything this world has to offer. You've experienced everything this world has to offer. But you knew you were at the end. You were about to breathe your last, and you knew you had lost eternity. What will you trade for eternity? What of all this would you give up? The obvious answer would be everything. I'll trade it all for my soul. Trade it all for eternity. And if we knew what was waiting for us, we would easily delay gratification until then. Listen, I don't stand before you as a person who has this figured out or has mastered this or is above the trappings and the temptations of our world. This is a battle I fight every day and lose more than I win. I'm trying to figure this out. And please hear me. I am not saying that the good things of this world are bad, or that we're supposed to become monks and live in sackcloth and ashes and not enjoy life, or not laugh with friends and not enjoy a great meal and take a vacation and take a trip. We're not being called to a monastic life. This isn't about feeling guilty for the good things in life, but there will be times in our journey with Christ when we come to crossroads where we realize we can't continue to do what we're doing, live the way we're living, and follow Christ at the same time. And when those times come, as surely they will, I hope we would have the faith of Moses and say no to this because we know something better is coming. Let me get a bit nostalgic and then we're going to wrap up. This week is actually 13 years that Kim and the boys and I have been at Newday. And every second Sabbath of August, I kind of get a bit nostalgic, and I think, another year is passing. It's been 13 years ago this week that we first came to this little church built into the side of a hill down in Franktown. And what a great 13 years has been, yeah. Whew. What a journey God has been taking some of us on, building a building and planning a site in Parker, having two churches where now there's one, and just the journey that we have been on together. Some of you have been here for the entire 13 years. Some of you are here for the first time. You wonder what in the world we're talking about. Some of you have been here 5 years, 10 years. But often I've been asked, why are you still here? And I think I take that well. I take that well. But there have been other offers, bigger churches, bigger cities, whatever. Why are you still here? And the answer is always, number one, because I love these people. I love this church. I love the people I get to do life with on a regular basis. And number two, because I came into ministry because I want to see life change. I want to see the gospel in action. I want to see people falling in love with Jesus and being confronted with hard decisions and getting into the Word of God and saying, you know what, I'm going to make some hard choices and count the costs. And I want to watch people's lives change over time. And if you're in a church for a short amount of time, you don't get to see real life change. I want to watch people grow into depth. I want to see people fall in love with Jesus again and again and again. And walking with so many of you for 5 years, 10 years, 13 years has been awesome to watch how you've changed. And I see some of you look, I'm not saying I'm leaving, okay? So that's not where this is going, okay? So just lean in and listen, and don't worry about that. But to watch some of you grow and the sacrifices so many of you has made, that's what keeps me going. It's what fuels me. It's what keeps me engaged and on my knees and continue to pray, because you are the picture that the gospel is real, and you are living it. You're in the arena with Christ, and you don't have it all figured out, and you have more questions than answers, and there's hard stuff,
and you make a lot of mistakes and you fall down, but you keep trusting Christ and you're integrating him into your day as best you can. You're working hard not to earn his grace, not to earn salvation, not to earn heaven, but you're working hard to stay connected to him so his power can be manifested in your life. And that is just the most beautiful thing. And it keeps me going. But if we're honest, there's also a group here who has stalled. And maybe it's been for 5 years, 10 years, 1 year, just dug in heels. Maybe you came to that crossroad and Jesus asked you to pay something that there would be a cost. And you're like, no, that cost is too high. And you have stopped growing and you've made a decision. You know what? I'm just going to go through the motions. I'll go to church when I can, but I'm not really growing with Jesus. And I just wanted today not judge anybody. I'm not saying heaven is at stake for anybody. I'm not the judge of that. Salvation is by grace. Grace is a big thing. But I do know that when we get to heaven, there will be regrets. I know that I will have regrets that I'll have to live with for eternity. Wasted opportunities. Costs that I wasn't willing to pay. And I'd like for us to have as few regrets as possible. And so I'm asking those of you who may feel that you are stalled spiritually, that you're kind of just going through the motions, that you're not really in the arena, to come in, to lean in to Christ. That you would get serious about Jesus. You'd forget about the marshmallows. And you get serious about Jesus because life is short and heaven is real. And if there's one thing I would ask you to do, because in here we're all about Jesus. I mean, when I'm in church, yes, I want it. We have the best of intentions to leave here and live for Jesus, but then Monday happens. And the only ones who are able to take what we have here into Monday are those who do the hard work to stay connected. And so if there's anything I would ask you to do, it's the thing I've been asking you to do all year, is to get one of these and put together a spiritual plan of how you're going to stay connected to Christ Sunday through Friday. Get into the Word. See what God thinks about things, what he values, and join him in those values. Be in prayer, asking God to kind of be in you and walk with you and give you opportunities throughout the day to show you what costs he's asking you to pay, and that you'd be willing to give it up, whether it's social loss or financial loss or relational loss, whatever it is, that you're willing to pay the price. And so I was thinking, should I make an appeal, have people stand, blah, blah, blah. You know what? It's easy to stand in church. But if you are wanting to say, you know what, I want to move forward in faith, the faith of Moses, life is short, heaven is real, I want to live like that, I'm going to be standing in the foyer today. I got a stack of these cards. I want you to come and find me and just say, can I have a card? I'm going to put together a plan. I'm going to implement it tomorrow. I'm going to start walking with Jesus. I'm going to take him for real. Guys, forget about the marshmallows. Sometimes we say no. Sometimes we say yes. We follow Jesus. Heaven is real. Life is short.